one of the sort of the icons of our industry. So it's not a new term, but it's actually, just as an example, the term has evolved and the industry and the thinking has evolved enough that I can now sit on this panel, in this conversation, surrounded by people who are working in more traditional entrepreneurial or venture environments, right? It used to be that I would have this conversation, I'd be basically preaching to a choir. So the exciting thing about what's happened in the, with the TBL industry is that it's now sort of becoming, beginning to become mainstream enough that it can occur multiple times in a single day conversation around entrepreneurship. So that is very exciting. Where there's, and what it means for those of you who don't know, sort of it's this notion of accounting for impacts on environment and on society in addition to traditional financial metrics in the business context. And so there have been some standards that have emerged around this. It relates a lot to sort of the question of accounting, ultimately. And so there's some things that have happened over the last 20 years or so that start to get at how to answer this question effectively. We still have a long way to go. And so from our perspective in our company, we're really interested in how does that happen at the onset of the entrepreneurial exercise. So in other words, if we could design companies, products, and services that are contemplating the triple bottom line at the very outset, and we can design those factors into the company, then we're already thinking about the impacts that our products and services are having on society and the environment, all the way down the line. So including what happens to that product at the end of its useful life. So nobody has all the answers to these questions, but this is the paradigm that we are talking about and that is becoming more and more engaging for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I'd like to believe investors as well. But to answer your question about investors, as Matt said earlier, it requires, to some extent, a different mindset from an investor standpoint. And it's not going to match up wholly with the traditional venture investing model. So, but the good news is that that model is changing. As you also said, Matt, that model is also diversifying. So the opportunities for these kinds of entrepreneurs are growing, and the sources of funding are growing, and certainly the consciousness is growing among investors and philanthropists and policymakers and everyone. So that's sort of a beginning to answer that question, I hope.
Are investors finding out that they can, in fact, get the kind of returns that they want?
Oh, yeah.
With something like this?
I mean, it depends on the product, but yeah, I mean, so let's talk about the example of Nest Labs, right? Just this week. That is not necessarily a traditional triple bottom line company, but it certainly falls within the context of clean tech, and it addresses some really important questions. And they created a product and designed it to meet the needs of customers in their homes. In a way, it was addressing a really important consumer challenge. And they just sold their company to Google for $3.2 billion. So again, that's sort of the hype example. So we shouldn't assume that every company that's operating in this space, there's plenty of failures we can count on. As 60 Minutes reminded us last week, there's plenty of failures in the space. But a lot of that has to do, frankly, around the investor education piece and also the policy environment, which Sean talked about.
I have a quick question for you. I have had a theory on the social investor front